doing today? Thank you for watching another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, I know I have a routine to give up videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, but today's sort of a special edition. Connie Eileen sent me this great video on how to build a bridge between civilians and custody. Kind of don't build a wall, build a bridge, get that respect, and really get some good training out there for those civilians who want to come in and do the right thing. And as I'm watching, I'm like, wow, this video is phenomenal. And I don't want to sit on this video till Wednesday, because you never know who needs this now. So as Connie said, we can make this a special edition. So here's a special edition video for Tier Talk on Sunday that I think you guys will thoroughly enjoy, but you'll see it after we come back from our sponsor. Now guys, if you haven't, to show Tier Talks for you brave men and women that work in corrections, so please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. That bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. And don't forget to share these videos as well. And guys, we're almost at 10,000. Almost at 10,000. So we're going to go to our sponsor. And when I come back, I'm going to give the show over to Connie.
I wanted to attend a university that had an intelligence program. I wanted to look at problems different. I wanted to increase my critical thinking abilities. AMU offered those avenues to expand. Obtaining your degree as an adult, you're actually paying yourself and investing in yourself. You can't put a dollar on it, it's priceless. It's something that can never be taken away from you.
American Military University. Learn from the leader.
Hi, my name is Connie Eileen, and I am the founder of the Civilian Corrections Academy. I have almost 2 decades of correctional experience, and I decided that after I left the industry, there was so much more that I could do to be of support to the civilian employees as well as to the population, because ultimately helping those who help the population really just helps the system to improve. Long story short, I decided to take all of my correctional experience and infuse it back into the actual industry, right? By creating this training that really gives civilians a place to belong. I feel that there are times and spaces where we don't feel like we belong, and that's really in dealing with this whole issue of role ambiguity. And what I mean by that is that you step into the world of corrections, it's a non-traditional work environment. You really have no clue of what you're getting yourself involved in, and then you're kind of just off to the races. Once you're able to get started in your role, you have to learn how to navigate the internal prison politics, the inmate politics, and just your organizational politics. So depending on how your system is set up, you may or may not have sort of that political environment that you have to try to navigate. But in most cases where you don't work directly for the Department of Corrections, it can be very difficult figuring out how you fit in. I think the other thing that, this training really addressed is making sure that civilians understand that this doesn't necessarily have to just be a job, right? This can be your career, that you feel like you're a part of the system, you're a part of the team. And a lot of that comes with building trusting relationships with custody, really getting a true understanding of safety and security, understanding the rules, the administrative directives, really knowing how those rules apply to you. But before you even get through the door, for me, this training is to help you understand who you are as an individual. Now, I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, so I'm not even going there. But I think there are some basic things that you have to know about yourself as you decide to step into this environment. Understandably, you've got manipulative inmates who can try to get you to do anything, but you're more of a target when you walk in and you don't understand your vulnerabilities as an individual. So I've seen some very interesting videos over the years. I've also certainly seen firsthand how inmates can really get an individual to do some things that they wouldn't normally do. And I think when you're not very security aware or security minded, it's very easy to fall into the trap of you did something and you didn't realize that it was something you shouldn't have done. I mean, a general rule of thumb, you are not the appropriate person for the inmate to come and ask you for anything. Pencil, paper, envelope, nothing. Candy, cough drop, piece of tissue, Nothing. Like, okay, tissue might be a little dramatic, but there is a process in place for inmate requests. And the moment you start doing things out of process, your intentions can be called to question. So for me, this training is to help civilians truly understand how to, one, interpret the rules, because oftentimes you step into the environment, you're not an officer, you're not an inmate, and so you kind of feel like those rules may not apply to you. Please know that they do apply to you. The rules apply to everyone. Those administrative directives, if there are any internal protocols, policies, procedures, they apply to you. And the consequences apply to you. So if that's one of the first things you want to do, is really get a hold of the rules and understand them. So first class that I do, or the first module that we dive into, it really is talking about the rules and understanding the chain of command. Sometimes you're trying to accomplish something in the facility and you're just talking to the wrong person. You may not know who the right person is to talk to about that thing, right? But we come in and we just want to work, and we don't really get acclimated to the environment in a way that allows us to succeed in the environment. So when talking to the wrong person, maybe there's a big issue, maybe the officer on the tier isn't the right person for you to talk to. However, maybe if you talk to that officer and ask that officer for some guidance, that might help you not only, one, build the relationship with the officer on the tier, but also allow that officer to also feel some sense of like respect, like you respect him enough to address him if there's an issue, as opposed to going to whoever the next in command might be, right? Whether it's a lieutenant or it's a captain, certainly you don't want to start jumping into the depths and the warden and all that other stuff, because it's just not, that is not something that supports you building strong, trusting relationships with the people who you work with from day to day. At the Civilian Corrections Academy, we also try to make sure, aside from knowing the rules and knowing about yourself, we try to make sure that when you step into the environment, you understand sort of the expectations. What are the expectations of you stepping into a secured environment? And so we talk about contraband and how you could be bringing in contraband unknowingly. And don't get me wrong, there are some civilian employees, there's a very small percentage, but there are civilian employees who do clearly know the rules and bring in the contraband. So I'm not going to gloss over that as if that doesn't happen, but this training is to address the 98% that are doing the right thing. And so for those individuals, it could be something as simple as, I don't know, aluminum foil, right? You wrap your sandwich for lunch in aluminum foil, and when you were done, you threw it in the garbage, because that's what you would do in a traditional work environment. However, that same piece of aluminum foil could be used for so many other things that a civilian mind isn't necessarily thinking of. So one of the things that comes to mind for me is maybe an offender could decide to use that particular piece of foil to make a weapon, right? Or to make a badge, right? I mean, you just don't know what they will come up with. And you know, the intention isn't to make you be more like an inmate or think like an inmate. But in order for you to succeed in the environment, you have to be able to familiarize yourself with those elements that exist in your environment. I think the other thing too that we want to be able to explore is, so if you do find yourself in a situation, whatever that situation may be, I mean, particularly I'm going to speak to medical right now, right? So as a medical provider, there are ways that you conduct yourself with your patients in the community. And certainly when you step into the correctional environment, the things that you might say or might do, or the touch barrier you might break when you are sort of in the community is very different from what you would do in the facility. So yeah, you wouldn't quite touch the inmate unless it's deemed appropriate for a medical examination. If an inmate's crying, you're not going to rub the inmate's shoulder. Like, you might want to make sure they get a referral to mental health. Certainly you can ask them questions so you can assess what their needs are and why they might be in whatever level of distress they're in at the time. But it isn't for us to be consoling. But the challenge is that we aren't necessarily stepping into the role security minded, and so we are empathetic. And so empathy and compassion is definitely one of those challenging, those are some challenging elements or emotions, or it's very difficult for civilians to not show empathy. And this is not to say that officers don't have the same struggles, because I'm sure that they do. They are empathetic. They want to be helpful. They want to kind of address, it is a human being in some level of distress. And so the natural reaction is to be empathetic or try to assist. But as civilians, we've got to walk the line, right? You've got to find the appropriate way, the most appropriate way for you to still do your job, and you can still create those meaningful exchanges with inmates, and hopefully they're not, running the game on you. But do that and still maintain those professional boundaries. And so we discuss, how do you maintain those professional boundaries? Particularly in this training, we try to make sure that we take the concrete experiences, but also we take the abstract and we do some role playing and really understanding contextually, how do we manage these situations as they present themselves. Now, don't get me wrong, in most academy trainings, we go through it. It is paramilitary, so that's one thing you have to brace yourself for as you go through training. And rightfully so, we need to understand sort of the security operations, right? What are our parameters? What are the constraints? So what are the expectations of a civilian in a secured environment? But what we really need to know is, how do we engage in an inmate interaction one-on-one when most of the time there is no escort officer? What do you do? There is a lot of attention that officers get, and in that, they don't go to work with a firearm, or they're not in facilities with a firearm. And many facilities don't have some of the security equipment that officers should have. But civilians were stripped down to even less. All we've got is our mouthpiece, and you've got to be able to talk to the inmates and still accomplish your job. You have many offenders who will talk to you about everything under the sun. And as a provider, as a civilian in the environment, you have to learn and know how to redirect so that your mission is still accomplished. You haven't violated any of the inmates' constitutional rights, and you haven't violated any of DOC's expectations of you, any of the rules. On top of that, if you are a vendor, you've got to also make sure that you're meeting the requirements of your organization. And that can be a very tough space to be in. Those are tough conversations that have to happen. And so we explore how do we have those crucial conversations with DOC, right? If you find yourself going down the wrong path, or a path where you feel like something could be misconstrued, your best bet, let me talk directly to custody. Don't let it be something that they have to discover and that they have to automatically not trust you, because that's the space you go into. If it appears as though you're being dishonest, the reality is that trusting relationship you would like to be able to form with a colleague just won't exist. And word travels. You become that person, and now you've got all eyes on you, whether you believe it or not. And so part of this training for me is, civilians don't have the benefit of an extensive training academy where they get to bond with their colleagues for weeks and they get to sort of build those trusting relationships with each other. Civilians come in today, they meet a whole group of people. Depending on what shift you're on, you're going to meet different people. And that doesn't lend for you to really form those bonds unless you're on the same shift with the same people all the time, right? So there has to be a way that as a civilian, you step into the environment that people get to know you as a person. They get to know who you are. They get to understand who you are as a person. And so you, as the civilian, you have to be very intentional about what you put out there, right? I had an employee who came to me one day. She had on these tight jeans, she had on a close-fitted shirt, and she was going into the housing unit. So she came to me and asked me if I thought that her clothes were too tight. And I said, if you don't feel comfortable in what you have on, you should probably put on a lab coat. And the reason I had to respond in that way is, so one, as an administrator, like, I've got to think HR, right? Is this person going to now accuse me of saying something inappropriate to her? And two, we don't provide uniforms to the civilian staff, so civilians have to be very mindful of how they come into work and present themselves. You dress the way you want to be addressed. And so if you come in as though you're looking for a spouse or a partner or whatever it is, you may get treated that way, not necessarily by custody, but that treatment may come from the offender population. So you want to succeed in that environment, you have to understand the rules that guide that environment. You have to know who you are, what you're going to accept and what you're not going to accept. You have to be aware, be very aware. Be aware of yourself, be aware of the things that you're carrying in your hands. Did you drop something? Did you pick something up? Did you see something and not say something? Because when you see something and you don't say something, you could be seen as being a part of the issue. Right? Maybe you were a part of that exchange and that's why you pretended to not see something. So those are like the top things, but I think the other thing that I really want to impress upon folks is that as you go through this training, it teaches you about communication. How do you communicate in an effective way so that custody knows your intention and they can rely on your intelligence? Right? Civilians have so many interactions with the offender population, and they're not always with custody present. And when that does happen, we ourselves have intelligence that could contribute to an investigation. Maybe the inmate told you something in, one of your encounters, or they mentioned something. That's intelligence that DOC could use that could prevent the next code, that could prevent the next attack. We have to begin to shift our mindsets a bit. It was actually an officer who said, I wasn't hired to think. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, he started a long time ago. And so, yes, he said at the time, the expectation was him to be physically able to engage with the offender. And now we're in this space where, corrections is evolving. And there is the expectation that all folks that are a part of this system can effectively engage with this population, whether it's teaching them a skill, whether it's preparing them for reentry. There is this expectation that we know how to engage. And so while this officer's thought process was, I wasn't hired to think, you have all these academics who are civilians coming in who they're there to think. Like, that's what they do, right? So why not partner with custody so that you can serve as a complement? So my biggest thing is really civilians serving as an added layer of protection. We are there to add on to what DOC already has established. There's not this expectation that you come in knowing everything about corrections. You're not going to know all of the security hazards and all the security risks and how you might be the reason why we're vulnerable. But as a civilian, you do need to know where you stand from a security perspective. You need to understand custody's expectations of you. And when there's something that you think is beyond your scope, you do not hesitate to escalate that, because you don't want that to be misinterpreted as you doing something inappropriate. So Civilian Corrections Academy, we're all about making sure that civilian employees understand the reality of the environment. And we do that by making sure, one, we talk candidly and transparently about what goes on in the environment. We've made sure to partner with all the right folks. So we have mental health on the team, we have medical on the team, I have custody leadership on the team. And there's me, I'm completely open to anything that comes up throughout those discussions. I will do the research. If there's anything I'm not aware of, I've got tons of resources that I can tap into in my network to make sure that civilians get the best insight that they could have and be prepared for their reality as they step into the environment. So Civilian Corrections Academy is on its way, and I'm excited. I'm very excited because this is not something that I experienced. I learned trial by fire, but the business continues to evolve, training from different states and really taking that collective knowledge and putting it in there. Put it in the training so others, it's almost like creating our own civilian-based best practices. How do we make sure that all civilians have access to this information and that they're not blindsided when they step into the environment? So upon completion of, it's called A Civilian in Their House, is our training curriculum. You do receive a certificate of completion. For those newer employees, they do receive a certificate of correctional readiness, which is really a way for, supervisors to gauge how much support and guidance many of the newer civilians might need. And outside of that, we are definitely growing, and we're definitely excited about where this is taking us. So me, Connie Aline, I am the founder and CEO. I'm also now a criminal justice professor, so it's been a great semester thus far. I've had the honor and the pleasure of working with Anthony Ganji, who has been super supportive, and really we've gotten to know each other and understand what our different levels of expertise are. And that in of itself has allowed us to really flourish from the perspective of what are the things we can do to support each other on this journey to really make sure that our industry, that our profession gets the respect that it's due. So for now, that's Civilian Corrections Academy. You can visit my website. It's www.conniealine.com. I do have brochures and pamphlets and all that goodness, so there's tons of information out there. I will start doing some tips and tricks for civilians, which I will be sharing with Anthony. And for now, that's all. Feel free to reach out to me. Again, that's Connie Aline. I am the founder and CEO of the Civilian Corrections Academy. I can be reached at www.conniealine.com, or my email is civiliancorrectionsacademy@gmail.com. So hope to see you in the training soon.